That's all right. So it was a lesson there that God was teaching me about unconditional love. Another one was the idea of surrender. I had to give this over to God. I couldn't fix this. This wasn't something that I could fix on my own. So God was teaching me, Will, I'm big enough to handle this. You just got to give this to me and surrender this over to me. And the last thing I talked about the fear that the two were not going to mesh. I wasn't going to have a relationship with both. That was a lesson in faith for me. God was teaching me, Will, you need to have faith that I'm big enough to handle this. So there was dross that went up to the surface, and out of that, God showed me, this is what I want you to learn throughout this process. So what about for you guys? Have you ever had instances in the past where you've been in the fire, or more specifically and probably more relevant, where are you at right now? Can you think of any areas in your life where you can feel the temperature rising, you can feel the pressure rising a little bit? And I just want to share a few things that I've learned that have been helpful to me. I'm not in any way saying I've got this figured out or mastered in any way. But the first one is one of the things that Dave talked about yesterday, and that is, first of all, you have to have a grateful heart. And in a lot of these situations, and places that we don't want to be involved with or we don't want to go and we're uncomfortable with, we can also find an element of being privileged in those situations as well. Just to give you an example on this, shampooed my carpets on Saturday, right? Snowing, got some free time, shampooed my carpets. I'm a task-oriented guy. I'm stoked because I got that done. About 3 days earlier, one of my dogs had chewed up one of my favorite pair of boots, Gore-Tex, nice hunting boots, and demolished it, ate it. So I come back after church on Sunday, listening to Dave talk about having a grateful heart, and I walk in the house. 3 days later, not only did the dog eat the boot, but then she threw it up all over the carpet after it had been digesting for 3 days. Yeah, and then the other dog stepped in it and went all around the bedroom carpets. So, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm all fired up for God, and then I walk in and I got, you know, dog heaven here all over my carpet. So I'm thinking, I got to get the shampoo out, I got to clean this all up again. But I started thinking, okay, what do I have to be thankful for in this situation? And it sounds stupid, but I really did. I said, what do I have to be thankful for in this situation? And I said, well, I've got a carpet. You know, I've got a house that I actually have a place to live. There's people downtown with this last snowstorm that were sleeping under bridges, you know. So have a grateful heart. That would be the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is look for the dross. That is, what is it that's making you, what is it that's bubbling up to the surface that doesn't seem to be coming from God? And I'm going to use one of the verses that Dave talked about yesterday, Hebrews 12:11. It says, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's quite painful. Come on in. Everyone put them. Steve will put you somewhere. Okay, so the first one is, right, we're going to try and be grateful. Find the privilege in it too. Cleaning up dog puke, but still, hey, I got a house, and it's a privilege to be able to clean up this house. The second one is look for the dross, what's floating to the top. Hebrews 12:11. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's quite painful, but afterward there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So what Paul's saying here, what I think Paul's saying is when you start to recognize that dross coming up to the surface, lean into it. Don't turn away from it. Lean into it. Lean into God with it. And if you allow God to scoop that away from the top, to scoop those impurities away, when you come out of the fire, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So don't walk away. Lean into it. And so we've got the grateful heart, leaning into God for the dross that we find, the impurities that we see floating to the surface. And the third one is lower your melting point and commit yourself to the blacksmith. Now what I mean by that is, you know, when I was watching that show, they had all these metals at different melting points, right? If I'm honest, for me to be shaped by God, depending on where my heart is, my melting point's at varying levels at any given time, depending on where my heart is. If my heart's hard at a time, God's really going to have to allow the heat to get turned up pretty high before I'm going to be responsive to Him. It doesn't have to be that way. If my heart's right with God, if I have a heart of gratitude, if I'm connected to the vine, my melting point is a lot lower. God can shape me a lot easier. It doesn't have to be nearly as painful. So lower your melting point. And secondly, when you find yourself on the anvil, and you see the hammer getting ready to come down to shape you, submit to it. Commit yourself to that process. Don't run away from it, and ask yourself, God, what are you trying to do to me in this? What are you trying me to change me? How are you trying to shape me throughout this process? And the verse that I really like about this one is James 1:2. Dave did this one yesterday as well. Dear brothers and sisters, when trouble comes your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Now, I'll be completely honest with you here. This is one of those verses that I've always thought sounded good on paper, but as far as actually putting it into my life, it didn't seem really practical. But when I stop and read it, dear brothers and sisters, when trouble comes your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. I think the reason I've always thought this unattainable is because I've been looking at the fire. I'm not looking at the opportunity. I'm looking at the fire. I'm not looking at the opportunity that I can have to actually be purified and reshaped for something that honors God. So for me right now, looking at that last verse, for me right now, I'm looking for fires in my life. Now, I'm not creating fires in my life. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going out creating fires, but I am looking for fires in my life, areas in my life where I feel the temperature rising, I feel the pressure rising a little bit, and I realize that when I go in there, I have free will. I have a decision to make. The first one is I can focus on the fire, and what I've learned is if I focus on the fire whenever I do come back out, because I'm going in and I'm coming out either way, but if I focus on the fire when I come out, all I'm going to be is burned and scarred. Nothing's going to be changed. I'll just have a few more scars than I did when I went in. However, if I focus on having a grateful heart, if I focus on the dross, the changes, and asking God, what kind of changes do you want to make in my life? Whenever I do come out of the fire, it wasn't for loss, it wasn't for nothing. I can actually be changed and shaped for something more along the lines of what God created me to be. Now, for the questions tonight, in this first one, I'm just kind of curious. Last week, we talked about the question was, if you could ask God to bring truth into one area of your life, what would that be? And then we were going to go find a Bible verse that related to that. Did anybody do that? Man, I thought I would at least get one guy. All right, one guy. Okay. Well, slackers, we'll move on to number 2. If you guys need to find me and Stephen will be in the back praying for everyone. No, that's okay. Number 2 is quite lengthy, so we can spend our night there. Okay, so let's just work on number 2. Where do I find myself frustrated, disappointed, or feeling like things just aren't working in my life? This is your fire, guys. This is how you start to recognize your fire, okay? Can you think of anything in this situation to be thankful for? In the midst of this fire, what can you look at and say, this is what I have to be grateful for? This is actually where I'm privileged in the middle of this whole mess. What stuff is bubbling up in you as a result of your situation that doesn't feel like it's coming from God? This is your dross, guys. This is the dross floating up to the top. And then finally, what lessons do you think God is teaching you through this? And this is you on the anvil being shaped and molded by the master craftsman. Okay, so we'll just focus on number 2 tonight. Go through those kind of 4 questions there. Keep it real. Leave the religious junk in the parking lot. Be transparent. And 1, 2, 3, go.